So actually, we have two types of errors. One it is compile error, and another one is runtime errors.
Yeah.
Okay. So compile time errors actually, while if it is you are in Visual Studio IDE, so automatically it can highlight the error part and all. Okay. Then while typing the program itself, we can correct and we can. Okay. So error-free program we can create. Okay. So and
Yeah.
this runtime errors we cannot identify. So maybe it will come through because of logic or something else. It may be. Okay. So like this, if you have any runtime error, the program suddenly stops and it can terminate the execution, normal flow, execution flow. Okay. It can stop the program. Right. So get it. For example, sometimes if you are trying to get the integer value, but the user enters non-integer value, okay, non-numeric value. So then automatically it can raise an error. So that is called like a runtime error. So to handle such a type of situation, so when the runtime error occurs, suddenly the program will stop. Okay, it won't continue. It can stop the execution. Okay, so we may lose some data. Okay, we may lose some execution part if the program it is suddenly stops the execution. Okay, to handle this kind of scenarios and situations, we can use this exception handling. Okay, so how to do that exception handling? So to handle a runtime errors, we can use exception. Okay, so it can handle the runtime errors. So here we have two blocks, try, try block. So in this try block, we can put the code. So where you are expecting the runtime error will occur. So we have a catch block. Here we can specify exception class and object. So which class, which type of exception you are expecting, that exception type you have to mention here. Class.
Okay.
Exception type, which type of exception you are expecting, that type of exception you can specify the type. So like that, here it is. We have one more block. It is throw. Okay, if you are trying to raise the exception manually, so in any of the condition, you can put
Okay.
exception. You can create and raise and send it. So like this, but it is an optional part. So when you are trying to create your own exception, user-defined exceptions. So that type of scenario we can use throw block. Okay. So normally, whenever for example, whenever so if it is a predefined exception, automatically the compiler can detect and it can throw the catch block. Okay. So the try block contains the executable code. Okay, if it is a normal code only, but sometimes this code may causes an exception. Exception may come. Okay. So that type of scenario
Okay.
where you are expecting an exception will come under, so that you can put inside of the try block. Okay. So the compiler can execute this flow. So whenever the exception rise, so it can throws to the catch block. So one try block may contain many number of catch blocks. You can put like this. So many number of catch blocks. So because of you don't know what type of exception will come. Sometimes it may come type validation. Sometimes it may come some other index out of range exception. So like that. Understood? So we don't know what type of exception it will. Okay. So that type of scenario we can, for the precautionary part, we can put different kinds of exception types, and with objects we can mention many number of catch blocks. Okay. So the whatever the exception it rises inside the try block, if the related catch block it is existed, it can go into that catch block. Okay. The control will go to that catch block. Okay. So like that it is. So we'll see small example how to do that one. Right. So I am creating all projects in one location only one solution. Add new project. Exception handling example. Right. Just I'm creating here one integer array. So int some a is equals to int. So we need a size. So for that I'm creating n number of values. For that n is equals to console dot read line. So it is a string value. We have to pass it to integer into dot pass of console dot read line. So before that we can print one message to enter value size. Right line. Enter size of an array. So here it will be the n we can specify here. So then n number of integer values it can create. For array will be created here. So then we can display how many numbers you want to enter dot right line. Enter many numbers it can display 5. If it is 5 means it can display enter 5 numbers. So then int I is equals to you can start with 0, I less than n, I plus plus. Right. So we can get the value into this location. We have I is equals to. So in dot pass console dot read line. So after that, so I'm trying to get the value at a particular location.
Okay.
So we can write like this in console dot right line. Enter index. Otherwise enter location. So he will the user can enter one value. So that we can kept into index is equals to. So we are trying to get the value in that location, console dot right line. So value in the particular location is this value. Okay, comma. So index location, comma, a of index. This is what we have done the code. That's all. Just we have created an array, right? So and we are trying to get the value in the array particular location.
Okay.
So now, first of all, we can execute this program normally without exception handling.
Okay.
So exception handling example. this. See this? Here it is asking the array size. Okay, here I am entering the five,
Okay.
five elements I want to store.
Mm.
N. Okay, next time. Okay, I'm entering this 23, 45, 67, 12, 34. Okay, location I am giving 3. So it's working fine. Normally it is okay. Everything it is correct, right? So now this time I'm executing same. So here I'm giving instead of number, I'm giving this value. Text I'm giving. So some exception it is coming. So it stops the program and it's coming and it highlighting input string was not in a correct form. So because of you are in debugging mode, that's why it is coming here. Okay, I'm changing it to release mode.
Okay.
Release mode means so in a real time how the code it will come the same like it can exist.
Okay.
So instead of this, say this exception it is coming here. Input string was not in a correct format. The same exception will come, okay, in continue execution. See this error it is coming, right? So if 1 minute, we can
So the error
1 minute.
came because you gave
Yes.
the wrong value.
What?
The error came because you gave the wrong value.
Yes. Input string was not in a correct format. So whatever the string you given, that is not in a correct format like that it is shown. Now we are executing here it is. Okay. So entering. See here it is coming the exception and it stops the program, right? It is a real time value actually. Okay. So we can actually we can execute this exe file only. This only we can give to the client or whatever the user he is. Understood? So then it
Okay.
stops the program. So nothing to do there. Okay. So that's, for example, if you are doing the operations on the database, already you inserted 3 records or you updated some records in the database, right? So
Mm.
after that, you got an exception.
Okay.
Based on the previous results, you need to do some more updations on that another tables and all, right? So
Okay.
this time, so when the exception rises, automatically it stops the program. So you may
Yeah.
lose your code or you may lose your data. Okay, unnecessary database operations may be keeping inside. So to eliminate this kind of problems, okay, so we have exception handling. What we have to do, where you are expecting an error, that code you can put inside the try block, whatever it is. It is a complete code or one line of code, whatever it is. Okay, then you can specify catch block. So catch block means where you are expecting an exception. Okay, what it is coming, input string was not in a correct format. In uh, yes, format exception. Here it is. So, so I'm creating a variable e. So whatever you want to display, console dot write line. Actually, inside the catch block, So we are trying roll back the transaction, whatever you have done inside the try. Understood?
Okay.
When the exception rises, so based on the exception, you can identify what problem it is actually. So for example, you
Okay.
are trying to get the data from the DB, so you don't have any value. So then, but you are trying to access the value in the locations or something. So then it can raise an exception. There is no data, something like that. Nullable value you are trying to get, or object reference exception. So something like it will come. So then, so we can display here some e dot message. E, it is an exception object. It contains so many things like help link, H result, message, okay, and the source value, stack trace. Stack trace means how the exception it is raised under. Right now you can run this, so it won't stop the execution. It can exits the program normally. The program exits normally. Input string was not in a correct format. Okay, it is waiting for user interaction and all. Okay, the program it is exited normally. Okay,
Okay.
but the given input is wrong, so that it is stop the execution and it is giving a proper message to the user. Then it is shutting down the program. Understood? So now
Yeah.
again you can try to execute this. This time I'm giving the exact result, exact input. Okay. So even if you given here a wrong value also, it can show the same because of same error it is, right? Type error only, format error only. So even if it is a size or even if it is a value, whatever it is, so it can gives like that.
Okay.
So I'm trying to give the location 5, but we don't have a 5 values here, right? So now if you observe, it is showing as index out of range exception. Index out of range exception means you are trying to access the index which is not available in the array because the size of the array it is for trying to get the value in the fifth index position.
Okay. 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 Got it.
Okay, but we don't have any code to handle this error, right? We don't have any catch block to handle this error. So
Okay.
then, so if you put it in debug mode or whatever it is, it will be the same. Then what we have to do, we have to put one more catch block of index out of range exception E. So then we can write the message like actually I told you that in the inside the cache block, so most probably we are trying to do the rollback of operations or a major rollback operations what you have done for the try block. Okay, max we can do that
Okay.
only. If you have any what sensitive database operations, those we can roll back inside the cache block.
Okay.
Right. So now this time it can display an error. Index was the bounds of an array. So it's a proper message like that. So this like this, one try block may contain many number of catch blocks. Sir, I don't want to put many number of catch blocks. What we have to do? So simply you can give exception because exception is the base class for all the exceptions. Whatever the classes we mentioned here, format exception or input string was not in a correct sorry, format exception or index out of range exception or arithmetic exception, whatever it is.
Okay.
So if you this all these classes, exception class is the base.
Okay. I have one doubt here. So,
Hmm.
actually, if the exception comes under this main class exception, then only it will handle it and give the message which is in catch block. But suppose the error is something which is not in the exception class, then
Error it is not in the exception class.
hmm.
I- Actually, it is for example, it is a predefined exception. Automatically, it's sure we have an exception class for this. It
So all the exception that
identifies yes system. For example, if you put this one exception, it can handle all the exceptions.
oh okay, okay.
It can handle all the exception. That's what I'm telling actually. Exception is the base class for all the classes. We can convert
Got it.
base class type into any type. Yesterday we did,
So
right?
this is present under which library?
System. See here,
System only.
system dot exception.
Okay.
Okay, this is available in system namespace. That's why we put here using system.
Okay. Got it.
Right. So if you put exception, it is a base class, right? So we can convert the base class type object, base class object into any type of object, right? Yesterday we did, na? So
Yeah, yeah.
we have done one, what, in where it is? See, base class object we created, derived class object we created. We converted this base class object into derived class type. So like this, if you created base class object, so it can convert into any of the derived class object because it is inherited by all the derived classes, right? So any of the
Okay.
exception class derived by derived from this class only,
Okay.
right? So this is what exception handling. So we will see user defined exception. For example, in your program, if you are trying to create your own exceptions, okay. So for example, user age it is not match. Okay, if you are trying to create like one exception, so we can create our own exceptions also. That is called user defined exception. Understood?
Okay. Yeah.
So then, how to create a user defined exception and how to work with that? Let's see.
Mm.
User defined exception, right? So here I'm creating my own exception class first.
Okay.
Class less age. So I'm inheriting the class exception. So if you want if you want to create your own exception, you have to inherit. You should inherit this exception class, then only you can able to. Right. So then less age. Okay. So whatever the message you want to create for this, you can
Mm.
give string message. Here I am calling the base class function, base class constructor to construct the exception.
Okay.
So, and it is also like class.
Okay.
Okay. So and 1 minute. So you
Okay.
should write how to create it and all. So we created one constructor. So by using constructor only, we can create an object for the exception. Okay. So here we are calling the base class exception, base class method to create a message for the exception. Okay. So if you go to here, select this one and go to F12. Here we have that constructor, exception string message. Okay. Understood, right?
Okay.
Not an issue.
Yeah.
Here, when inside the try block, we can write the code, and compiler doesn't know how to raise this exception and all. That's why we put it in one condition, and manually we are raising the exception by using the keyword throw. Okay. So throw,
Okay.
it can throw the exception object it can throw. So we have to build that object by using the keyword new. Okay. So keyword new, invalid exception. What type of user defined exception you want to raise here? That class we have to create an object. Okay. Invalid age exception, and you have to mention the age and the source, because of my constructor is getting two values, message and source. So that's why I given message and source. Okay, then it can throw from here, and it can go to this catch block, and here it can catch that exception and it can handle it. Understood?
Okay.
So like this.
Yeah.
See here, and where we are now. So it is also like class structures is also like a class in C sharp. So there is no much difference between classes and structures in C sharp. In actually in C++ we have much difference between class and structure.
Okay.
Don't have much. We can also works like a class. Structure also we can work like a class. So we can create an object. We can create a members, fields, methods. Okay, properties, indexes. All these things we can create inside the structure. We can access those things. Right. So entities we cannot inherit the structures. Classes we can inherit.
Okay.
We can inherit. Right. So see this.
Structure
Uh,
cannot
we
inherit.
cannot inherit structure. So we can define structure. Define using the keyword struct. Using the keyword struct. Okay. By using this keyword, we can define the structure.
Okay.
So the syntax of the structure is, so any modifier you want to put. So public modifier or private modifiers you can put. Modifier access modifier you have to put, and the keyword struct, and structure name. So you have to follow the naming convention whatever you are following for class. Okay. So it is a structure. So whatever the code you want to put it inside of this structure, you can put inside of this opening and closing curly braces.
Okay.
Right. So that's it. So let's see one example.
Okay.
So normal structure we can create, and with the methods. Okay, all these things we can create.
Okay.
Structure example. Right. Here we can create a structure like strus. So within the namespace, right? No need to create a public access. No need to provide a public access.
Okay.
So then public, no need of public, int roll number, string name, address. So three values enough, I think. Okay, right. So now, if you want to create a member for the structure, you can create like this. Student. Yes. Series. Okay. Console dot right line. Enter. Student data. Given here. So s dot. We need to access this from outside. We have to put the access modifier. Then you can try to get value for roll number is equals to roll number is a field. We can insert the value into that int dot pass or console dot read line. Okay. So now get the value for name s dot name is equals to console dot read line. So trying to get the value into s name. So like address also address. The same like we can display the student details. Console
Okay.
line student details and the console dot write line roll number 0 backslash n name 1 comma s dot rno s dot name console dot write line address comma s dot address. So here we can give some weighting for console dot write line. You can run this. The code set a startup project. This is how you created one structure and we are reading data into that.
Okay.
So student data, roll number 21, address. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Got the screen right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It got stopped for 1 minute. I mean, few seconds.
It is showing like this. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then, if you want to create any functions, okay, we can create inside of this. So when
Okay.
you have only members, no need to create, no need to instant. Now it is a value type. Okay.
Okay.
So if you want to add up some functions, so add uh, add new project, start with functions. So I'm taking the same structure I'm creating here for the student, roll number and name. So I want to read the data. So for that, so the readings function, I'm creating the function reading. So public void read.
Okay.
Okay, so no need of this. Yes. So I remove this public also as well.
Okay.
Okay, then so to display that, public display the data, public void display. So you can display the data here. Name it is. Okay. So if you student, yes. If you try to yes dot read. So if you observe here, it is showing
Showing error.
unsigned local variable. Yes. Okay. Is it?
But why it is showing like that?
Yes, we have to instantiate this.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay. Now, if you observe here, a local variable it is. Yes, it is.
Okay.
S dot display. So then console dot read line. It's waiting. Purpose of waiting. Right. So now you can execute it. Structure with functions. It works like same. This the same like it is working.
Okay.
So there is no much difference between creating class and structure, but
Okay.
we cannot inherit the structure. We can
Okay.
class only we can able to inherit, right? So
Okay.
we can also um, this not work like this in C sharp. So like a classes also we can create, but in C++ we cannot work like this. Structure is different than classes. Okay,
Okay.
so that's all. And already properties we discussed. Right?
Yeah.
So if we want to make it as a read-only property, we have to put only get, not set. Understood what I'm saying?
No, sir.
Okay. So for example, I created one class. This example we created, I think so. Properties example. So here we created one property, right? A roll number. So, okay. I don't want to I don't want to allow the user to set the value. So that time we can put like this private set. So automatically the user not allowed to put this one. Okay. Otherwise we can remove the set only you can get you can. So if you specify that get alone, we cannot access this because it is a get property. We cannot read. We cannot set the value. Okay. We can only read the value. So that what we have to do. Then remove this and create one constructor. So create one constructor for this public student. And roll number. So this roll number is equals to roll number. This value. Okay, we can only set the value inside of this construct, inside of the class only. Outside the class, we cannot set the value.
Okay.
So this is called a read-only property or a private set.
Okay.
Okay, if you want, we can make it as a private set. Otherwise, we can do like this. So outside, we cannot access that. So, for example, we can type one so that it can set to that one phone number. Okay, for example,
Okay.
15 I give it. Properties example. If you run this, no, no. run this, it is coming around 24 and 202. Okay. So
Okay.
roll number it is 102. See, here we are given like this. Oh, into 2 we given. Why it is coming? Not roll number, roll number. Sorry. You can set the value for roll number. Here also I want to display that roll number. Roll number. See, 12 and 15. Whatever I pass from here, 12 or 15, that only it is displayed. But outside we cannot. We can't
Oh,
do that. Even here also. Instantiation also. No, we cannot do that. Okay. Because it is a private set. Private set means outside we cannot set the value. Inside the
okay.
we can able to set the value.
Okay.
Okay. So
Yes, sir.
the properties of private set method, private properties. Sorry, read only properties.
Okay.
We have some more minor topics under. We have one more big concept, what major concept, namespaces creation. Okay.
Okay.
We have some more little bit small concepts is there. We will finish all the concepts tomorrow 19%. And after tomorrow we will discuss about this what namespaces. Okay. So
Okay.
the what introduction part of C#.NET features, all these will cover.
Okay.
Okay. Then later we'll start that Windows application. So we'll finish all
Okay.
these things in this week. All OOP concepts and all we'll finish in this week. Okay. Monday onwards we will.
Okay.
Just 1 minute.